Is this working? So, yesterday I couldn't quite put exactly the reasons together as to what is the Mother Sphere's intent on behind actually sending the airborne squadrons even to Earth. But I think I now may have pieced it together somewhat. So, there's that moment before the credits roll where the hologram of Mother Sphere comes and congratulates Eve and Lily for surviving the ordeal as well as completing her will, and she welcomes them back into the space colony. But right before that happens, she chooses to say the exact words of, "I respect your decision, Eve, even if it is a bittersweet one." Now, that refers to the idea that the Mother Sphere probably knew the Elder Knight Eva somewhat either like on a negotiation basis, like maybe she was at some point like exactly doing that, negotiating possibly either peace, takeover, or a possible coexistence of the Night Hebas as well as the Andro-Eidos androids as a species, a harmonious like get together and the possibility of being able to live together once again. But the Elder Knight Heba refused the ordeal because Adam says in his boss fight right before you start fighting him, he says that you would never be able to like replace humankind because you were created from like completely from nothing, like you don't even have an ounce of human DNA on you. And he also said at the same time within those lines that Earth is not big enough to have two like overwhelmingly like intelligent species living in it at the same time. So it cannot have two conquerors basically living at the same time. It doesn't have enough accommodation, enough resources like water, food, and that kind of stuff you would imagine. So the Elder Knight Heba, aka Adam, believes firmly that that is the case, and that is the reason as to why he forced the Andro-Eidos androids into the space colony in the first place. And then the Mother Sphere, the only reason as to why the Mother Sphere even wants to attack Earth is the resources. I would imagine that unless they have traveled somewhere very far in space or something, like we see the very like ending like scene there before the credits roll, where the entire space colony is just like massive like rings of like space like debris and like this massive like almost like rings of Saturn just built around like Earth over time when the Andro-Eidos androids just kept rebuilding and expanding the colony's size throughout times or throughout the decades. So they are clearly running out of resources because we do know that there is supposed to be 4 of those orbital elevators and 3 of them because of Lily's and Eve's dialogue in the game when we are ascending the 4th orbital elevator that was still working, or was in a working order before, you know, follow the story. The 3 of the other ones were apparently not working, and Lily confirmed that they were not working. Either there's no connection to them or they were straight up destroyed, one or the other. So the only one of those orbital elevators, along with the hypertube that moves the cargo into the orbital elevator, that moves it to space to be fired as supplies into the colony. So that is the only way that they can get resources, is my guess. And because it somewhat recently, well, actually that's too acute problem, but throughout the few decades that they have been sending the airborne squadron members, actually here is a very big gap in my knowledge here. Like, I know that there's 7 airborne squadrons that they have sent, but at which intervals have they been sent? That is something that the game never makes clear to me. I know that the Andro Eidos's Eve Protocol squadrons are sent like decades after the final war. That is clear. Like 70 years or 60 years or something like that. But as to which intervals they are set, now that is where the problem lies in. Like, we can take like Raven as one example for this. Like, Raven is of the 2nd Airborne Squadron, so it's the same one where Lily came from, basically. Well, to my understanding, well, we'll see on this next playthrough way it goes. When I pay even more attention to these nuanced small details and just collect the big picture, you know? But, yeah, they were basically deployed at around the same time, and you see, like, how deprived Raven is of her former, like, virtues and values that she held dear at the moment in the game when we actually meet her as the black-winged, like, I wanna almost say fused Naitiba with an Andro Eidos body. Same thing that Adam is trying to do to us. The same thing that Orcal was also trying to do. Like, Orcal also says in his final moments when you talk to him, when he fuses the 4 Master Cores together, he says that he was the first of the humans to be fused with a Naitiba, not with a Naitiba, of the humans that were evolved into the Naitiba, and then they fused him when he was a Naitiba into an Andro Eidos android. And the result was what we saw in the game. Pretty successful. But he was nowhere near as successful as it needed to be for like a new species to like be born from it, like what Adam is suggesting, or the Elder Naitiba at the end of the game. Which could have possibly been a thing because of Eve's help. And now can we talk about Eve's help? Now, so I was pondering this for quite a while before I figured something out about this. Why the hell does Adam, the Elder Naitiba, why does he need Eve's help to get the hybrid drives for Zion? Why did he ever need the help for that? But it's actually quite simple. Like, Adam in his... well, I almost like monologue when he starts yapping before the final fight with him. He says that he truly and sincerely wanted to actually help the humans. And actually, this is one of the things that I have to give a lot of credit to the devs when it comes to like the intimate screenplay with the character at that moment. I think Adam's character is probably my favorite portrayal of a friend character that we deeply should care about as the player, because the character is very important side character or character to the protagonist that turns out to be quote-unquote evil, or turns out to like betray us at some point, like our knowledge or trust towards the character. That kind of twist and the way he shows his conviction to us in his monologue and with his like mannerisms and his behavior is very authentic feeling in that scene. When I was watching it the second time, I did notice that like that has to be like commemorated for. Like, that is actually very well executed scene. But yeah, apart from that, where was I? Yeah. So Adam sincerely wants to help any of the surviving humans, including the android as humans as well. He wants to help both the authentic humans, the Nightibus, but he also wants to help the androids. And he says it also in his dialogue when you start fighting him before before he becomes the Elder Nightibus monster, as he calls himself. He says that, like, if I just remember what he exactly said there. Like, Raven also says when you kill Raven, she says that, like, you don't believe, like, she says this to Eve, you don't believe that we are humans. And that's how Eve actually does feel like, though. But Raven does not feel like this. Why does Raven not feel like this? Because Raven was actually serving the Elder Nightibus, aka Adam, for quite a while. I don't know how long amount of time, because I don't know when the first and the second squadron actually deployed. So I just have to completely guess. But seeing how much development there is in Raven on her character, like the transition that when we see her on the holograms, which to my understanding are actually all true, because Eve does go on a bit of a hippie fit about the idea or the fact that she was completely played, and everything that we met in the story up to them during the research facility moments was actually mainly just set up. Like, Adam, obviously, as well as probably Raven as well, like, they knew exactly what we were going to find in there. And Raven particularly feels like she confirms that with the collaboration of Adam's help, she was planting the holographic messages for us to read during our journey. So I think with those is that they were actually genuine, and they were the real past memories of Raven, but they were just used illegitimately as a vehicular device to perpetuate the doubt towards Mother Sphere and our own identity towards enlightenment. And the hopes there was that instead of Eve being Eve and Lily both being disgusted about what they are, I think Adam and Raven were both hoping that Eve and Lily were going to actually be, like, empowered by what they were, like, accept what they are. But they never did that. Eve and Lily, like, they are very childish with their decision making and how they show their emotions throughout the game. And it's very much like, how do I say this? Eve and Lily very much live in the moment. They hold their emotions on their sleeve throughout the game. So you can have them be very different people at one moment, even if their character arc should suggest that they should have matured enough in the story that they should feel a certain way all the time. And it should be always delivered as a pretty easily readable message to the player. When you just see how they talk, you see how they walk, you see how they posture when they talk to each other, and all of these, like, nuanced, like, mannerisms that humans do when you develop as a person towards something. You become something that you were not before because of the surroundings and the other people around you that you have experienced possible trauma with, and intimate moments and heartfelt, like, grievances, and all of that stuff shapes you as a person anyway. That's how identity forms on humans. So that typically would play a very strong role on any of the normal stories. But even Lily, as I already said, they wear their emotions on a sleeve. And it changes drastically from one moment to the next. It's almost as if they... I'm talking about the developers now. It's almost like the developers themselves, like, intentionally decided that Eve and Lily particularly were not allowed to have too fast character development in this game, if any whatsoever, because it would feel too inauthentic to what they themselves are in the story. Like, I would imagine that if we are, like, talking canonically in this game, the moments in this game probably happen within, like, I don't know, maybe a week's time or something. Like, that's the amount of events that happens in this game. From start to finish, this game is probably, like, 1 week maybe goes past or something. Something like that, you know? So, having there be that much character development in that time, I feel like they... I feel like they, well, felt that it would feel too inauthentic for, like, artificial intelligences, even if they have senses of self-consciousness imprinted on them, like Lily and Eve do, and Raven also. Like, they would not be able to develop fast enough to be able to, like, show these, like, very, like, human-like personality changes and natural, like, progressions in that amount of time. So that would be a good way to explain as to why they feel so, like, stagnant in their character development. Now, is that a good thing exactly? Well, when you have a game that almost every single other character in the game has actual character development that you can feel and sense and see, and then you have a few very important characters that you always see on your screen, or damn near always, and are very important in the story, and you see how they don't share that same development, it creates this, like, subconscious, like dichotomy between almost being confused of what you are experiencing when you play the game. Because on the other hand, you see normal character development and people being impacted by what they have experienced in the past, what they have currently experienced in the present, and those moments strongly shape how they feel later when you talk to them, when you interact with them, and you see them on your screen. You see how their conviction towards life and its challenges has changed like that. But with Eve and Lily, as two examples, when you do not see that all the time, it is very disorienting to try to care about the story at times. Like, it got so bad for me, actually, that... You know, I was thinking about this for a moment, actually, now that I'm looking at the main menu screen. If you asked me what color Eve's eyes were, I would not be able to answer that question. And you know how, like, I have played this game, if you look at the mod? Like, I literally changed her appearance probably within, like, every 2 hours. And a person who does that does not remember what color her eyes are. Do you think that's a little strange for somebody who pays that much attention to it and changes an appearance of a character that you look at all the time? And I would not be able to think from the top of my head what the color her eyes are. You want to know the reason to that? Because it got so bad. The screenplay with Lily and Eve particularly, because of the reasons I just talked about earlier, it got so uncanny to look at the two characters that I almost avoided eye contact at a point between the characters during, like, the cutscenes and the dialogue moments. It was that bad. Like, it literally took me off from so many of the moments that I literally felt like it was better if I just looked at their entire appearance and just listened to them talk over actually looking at them in the eyes. You know, the window to the soul was like, yeah, we know, as eyes are typically metaphorized, what the fuck am I saying? Metaphorically, like, talked as. Like, that just... Oh, that made the experience even worse, if I even tried to do it, you know? Like, no amount of, like, changing, like, the game when it comes to, like, you know, what the language you play the game as, the fucking, I don't know, graphics of the game or anything like that. No amount of, like, technical alteration to the game's presentation is gonna fix that from the post-production. That is just something that they should have, in my opinion, thought a little more. You know, it is just too uncanny when you see Lily and Eve on the screen this often, for them to act the way they do. It just does put you off. It really does. I can't be the only one who feels that way either. But something that I can definitely be the minority on is being the minority of the people who actually care about it. But here's some food for thought. Why do I care about it? Because I immerse myself on what I am seeing. I mean, that's how movies, books, and any entertainment works that you really want to care about and invest your time in. If you really do want to care about it and invest yourself in it, you pay attention to these details. So I'm not gonna go ahead and say that some people who play the game are just not gonna, like, notice this whatsoever. Because that's not how humans work. You will subconsciously notice these things. Same things I've noticed. A lot of them. But most people are just not able to articulate or take the time to articulate their thoughts the way that somebody like me wants to do, you know? So, I feel like there's a lot of people who just enjoy lying to themselves because it makes an experience better than facing the truth a lot of the time. And at times I almost wish that I did do that too. In fact, I've been thinking about this for a moment when it comes to playing video games. Is I feel like I am almost paying too much attention to a lot of stuff in games. Like, they are mainly meant to be fun, obviously, but I think the games themselves are an issue, like how the games have, like, developed, you know? Like, games nowadays have, like, generally speaking, they have massive budgets, obviously. You have, like, massive budget going to the storytelling, the combat, whatever the combat is in the game, like, the background stories, the graphical design, obviously, the fidelity, and fucking everything that goes down into making a finessed product like this. So when you take all of that into account, like, your expectations to what you are viewing as a reader just jump sky high, you know? Especially for people like me who have actually, like, I have had my good share of pedigree when it comes to very good games. And when I have that context on what I personally consider, both objectively as well as constructively, taking and breaking every single detail of a game that I genuinely consider either a masterpiece or damn near masterpiece. And I just think logically, out of every single piece, what makes it so damn good. Like, it is insanely hard for me to enjoy some games that just miss some important stuff. It really bothers me. But then there are examples like, well, I haven't talked about this in a while, but here we go again. Let's talk about Nier Automata for a short while. So, Nier Automata, as I very famously like to say, it's my favorite, most imperfect game that I have ever played in my life. Like, there is so many things that are not done well in that game. But the things that are done well in that game, which are very important, which, let me think for a few moments, which those most important ones are, immediate one that comes to mind, interactivity and player urgency. Those two things that game nails insanely well. Like, the most important thing for me, just fundamentally when you pick up any game and play it, is it responsive? Does it feel interactive? And does it feel like the game is giving as much player urgency at all times when you play the game as it possibly could? If those boxes check out really nice, then the game is at least, and I do wanna say at least, a great game. Like, it's that simple. That's probably the most important thing the game has to get correct. And Nier Automata does get that very much correct. And then the music is obviously amazing in the game. The storytelling is amazing in the game. Okay, actually, I do have to say, I think the traditional storytelling between... Actually, no, I'm not gonna say that. The traditional storytelling in Nier Automata is not the most amazing thing. It's good, but it's not incredible by any means. However, it's the enriching context that game's storytelling has in it. The side quests, the documents, the meta-breaking content, the rule-breaking content in the game, the story moments like the novels that the game keeps throwing at you at very intimate moments throughout the game. Like, there is so much rich content in that game that makes you really care about what you are playing in that game. But the traditional storytelling parts in the game are actually not that amazing. They are good, but they are not the main show. But it's because the game hits it out of the park that well with the two most important things that makes you invested in a game. Is substance that really feels when you read it and see it. It really makes you feel like the developers truly cared about the world that they were creating. And then you have the responsiveness, the interactiveness, and the player urgency that is completely on point, and just playing the game, mechanically speaking, just feels nice all the time. You have those two things correct. One thing gets the player on the door, one thing keeps the player engaged, and then the last thing, which is the enriching storytelling, makes the player love the game. Those things Nier Automata hits out of the park so well that you can almost ignore any of the lacking parts about that game. Like many of the boss fights, for example, not being too interesting. The combat, if you don't invent more exciting stuff yourself like I do with the mechanical gameplay and all that, if you just normally use light and heavy attacks or whatnot, the combat does get quite mundane. It's still satisfying because the player urgency is really nice and it's very interactive, but it's nothing that exciting. But the things that it does hit out the park are just so good that it just makes you love the game to death anyway. It just feels nice to exist in that game. It feels nice to play all the time, and it feels like the game really values your time. It just feels like that. Now, I would want to feel the same way with this game. I would want to feel that way. But at least on my first playthrough, I was off-put by even Lily's character development, as well as the very heavy late-game balance of exciting content that is challenging. That it almost felt disrespectful to see the story push itself forward when so many things in the story that are normally very pivotal for story to work are just conveniently brought up at times. Like the sudden character developments of Lily or Eve during certain scenes, for example, or certain short moments, or when Adam just randomly disappears and he's almost never given a setup. That's a good example as well. This game is not good at at making setups and payoffs. That's something that this game does very poorly. It's like every time that there is some emotional moments in this game, it's almost like the player has no reason to care. Or there's two ways this works. There's two ways a game makes player immediately care, or when you're watching a movie or reading a book. There's two ways that you can make the player, or the reader, I suppose, I should just say reader, that you can make the reader care about the character or where the story is going. You either have to have such a lovable combination of characters on the screen, or what you are reading about, that it doesn't matter. Like, it just doesn't matter for the story, like how they are acting before certain scenes. Or it doesn't always matter that they are showing strong character development. Because the moments when something surprising happens, you just care innately about it because you have placed that much value on what you are experiencing. So the value that you're experiencing comes only from you, not external sources. Now that's how people usually who really love a product, that's how usually they feel. I feel like that with games like Nier Automata. But that's only because the great stuff that the game has in it, the really incredible stuff, is just that good that I can mostly ignore any of the weaknesses. And then the other way that you can make the player like really care about the characters that are portrayed on the screen is by setting setups and then slowly building those moments where the player is like on the edge or the tension is increasing before a moment. Very slow tension build up. Just give it time, and then at some point it just starts slowly erupting, and then it just erupts to a moment that is supposed to be emotional or very impactful in the story. And that is how you externally, as the source material, make the reader care about what you are seeing. You give them actual reasons by showing, by telling, as to why they really should care. You do that good enough, and the player or the reader will care, and the moments will hit correctly. That's how most stories are written. The former example that I gave is how you can have such a lovable collection of stuff in the game that it doesn't matter a whole lot if the setups are good enough. But that former is significantly harder to pull off. And I feel like this game is trying to pull off that. Although I already did explain as to why Lily and Eve act the way they do, so I'm not gonna go back to that, but take that context into account. I feel like the developers wanted that they keep Eve's and Lily's performance as authentic to their background as possible, but at the same time make them so charming, adorable, and make the player care about them so much that it genuinely does not matter how they build up to those moments as much. Just that the moments happen, and then the player innately cares about what is going on. That's, I believe, what they wanted to do. So that's the latter, or, well, I mean, that's the former option that is harder to do. But it didn't hit me in this game. The performance on the characters was too uncanny for it to hit home for me. And I cannot be the only person who feels like this. But yeah,